Welcome to the broadcast. He is a former Army general, congressman, and president of Guatemala. José Efraín Ríos Montt ascended to power in 1982 after a military coup during one of the bloodiest periods of his country's civil war. The 36-year conflict between the government and left-wing guerrilla forces left more than 200,000 people dead and 1 million refugees. Many say Ríos Montt's 17-month rule accounts for a large portion of those casualties, with Mayan indigenous groups suffering the brunt of the many atrocities committed. During this period, Ríos Montt had close ties to the United States, receiving direct and indirect support from many agencies, including the CIA. For the past 3 decades, victims and human rights groups have been pursuing Ríos Montt for alleged genocide and other crimes against humanity. Over the years, Montt remained in public office, which kept him from prosecution. That ended in January of last year when his term in office ran out. And days later, the 86-year-old finally appeared in court to face charges. America's Now contributing correspondent John Holman recently went to Guatemala to see what's next for Montt and his many victims.
The highlands of northwest Guatemala. The Ixil indigenous group have lived here for centuries. They gave their name to this rugged area.
Como anu watita dan angsin tak astal dan matsiete ayo tong asweta et miro tu sentral at kat into pulay da kale wet tong kapal evet kaska ayil katel ating kat opet ko papaski.
Juana Brito has lived in these mountains all her life. Like many Ixil people, she and her family live off the land until the day that the Guatemalan army burst into her community, Pulay, in 1981. When they burnt down the village, Juana and her family were forced to flee. Like over 70% of villages in the Ixil area, Pulay was razed to the ground by government forces to dissuade villagers from helping the army's opponents, the left-wing guerrilla movement, which had roots in the region. 29,000 Ixil people were displaced during this time. Juana, her husband and father fled to the nearby town of Chicots. When the army arrived to burn that village too, they hid in a cave. Homeless and penniless, the family had to find a way to eat. They owned lands nearby, so early one morning, Juana's father set out for them. But the army captured him en route. This is the spot where his body was thrown. Juana's father was one of over 170,000 Ixil people who were killed between 1982 and 1983. The period that this man was in charge of the country. General Efraín Ríos Montt took over the presidency in March 1982 in a military coup. His 17 months in office has been described by human rights organizations as one of the most bloody periods of the Guatemalan Civil War. During his time in power, the Guatemalan army is accused of intensifying a campaign of rape, torture and killing against men, women and children in indigenous villages. It was part of a scorched earth policy, which was carried out to its full extent in the Ixil region. Now, 30 years later, Ríos Montt has been brought to trial. He's accused of genocide for failing to prevent mass killings of the Ixil population. On trial with him is his former intelligence chief, José Rodríguez, accused of the same crime. This is a hugely important day for many Guatemalans, as you can see from this queue snaking its way outside of the country's Supreme Court. It's the first time that a former head of state has been tried for genocide in a national court. More than 120 witnesses have given evidence during the course of the trial. For many of them, it's the first time they've spoken publicly about what happened to them. Francisco Soto is one of Guatemala's leading human rights lawyers and part of the prosecution. He's been working for years together with victims and human rights groups to get Ríos Montt to face trial.
Mira, yo creo que es un hecho histórico el tema de este juicio. Yo creo que, por una parte, es hacer justicia a las víctimas que nunca tuvieron la posibilidad de poder llegar con un tribunal a contar lo que sucedió. Básicamente fue el...
Soto says there is clear evidence not only that there was genocide, but that Ríos Montt was implicit in letting it happen.
Existió la intención de destruir al grupo étnico Maya y te lo demuestran en buena medida los documentos.
But there's no smoking gun in the case, no signed order. Instead, through various documents, including field reports from the Ixil region sent to Central Military Command, the prosecution hopes to prove that Ríos Montt had an overall knowledge of what was happening and did nothing to stop it. Despite the atrocities it committed, many Guatemalans feel that the army did the right thing in the civil war by suppressing the guerrilla movement and keeping the country together, whatever the cost. This courtroom is full to bursting. The events and atrocities of the civil war here continue to divide Guatemalans, and this trial has become a focal point for those divisions.